Welcome in to the Arkansas Sports Network's Hometown Sports Football Preview, proudly presented by Arkansas Tech University, D3 Auto Sales, and by Metcalf Trucking Company. Today, the ASN crew previews Class 3A.
Welcome into the 3A edition of Hometown Sports Conference Classification Previews. We're glad to have you along. We introduced ourselves last time, but we're going to do it again. Got Carson Ward here on my right, and then we've got on my left, I've got Alex Gallion of Brooklyn. We got Jaran Miller. He is a longtime ASN colleague here, and so we're glad to have each and every one of you along. We're going to kind of cut through the preliminaries here, and we're going to get right to it. We're going to break down conferences. We're going to break down our state champions. We're going to pick our state champion, and we're going to talk about possible D3 Auto Sales MVP candidates in the 3A. So getting right to it, we'll start right at 3A1. 3A1 is a league that doesn't get a lot of love, but at the top of that league, you've got Boonville, you got Charleston, but there's a new one in that league that is really making some waves. They made waves last year, making it to the semifinals for the first time in school history, the Mansfield Tigers. And then you've also got Lavaca, West Fork, Hackett, Greenland, Cedarville, but that top three, very, very good top three.
Mm-hmm. Well, you look at that conference, and two of those teams. Two of the coaches that I want to mention: Doc Crowley at Boonville and Whit Overton at Mansfield. Of course, Coach Ricky May at Charleston. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that can really, he's put together a team the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Interesting about that, by the way. Doc Crowley is from Charleston, graduated from Charleston. Ricky May graduated from Boonville.
Yeah.
So they've switched, and they're best friends, by the way. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Boonville, defending state champions. They lose Dax Goff, but like Mansfield, they run a very heavy run system. Charleston tends to be more of a spread it out kind of team, but those two teams are going to run it down your throat. They, they're built like Harding, where they're just going to go in 3 yards in a cloud of dust if they have to, get down the field. And now that Dax Goff is out at Boonville, but Boonville, they're going to have to find a guy that's going to step in and take the reins of being the lead back on that team. You move into Lavaca, West Fork, Hackett, Greenland, Cedarville. Those are the last couple teams in that conference. Lavaca's a team that has had some success in the past, but that's going to be a really competitive conference this season. Boonville is still, to me, the favorite. They're who I would pick to be the conference champion. But don't be surprised if Mansfield comes back out with Coach Overton and really comes out and makes a run at it this season.
So can we have a D3 Auto Sales MVP without Dax Goff? I mean, that guy was in every mention. It was football. It was not basketball. It probably would have been if he would have tried a little bit harder in basketball. But baseball, he won our MVP as a junior. He was in the mix as a senior. He was in the mix in the top three, I believe, in maybe both his junior and senior season. Yeah. An all-time great there at Boonville. But he does move on. And as you said, they've got to find some guys to come and carry that load. But Boonville is the traditional power in that conference. Let's make no mistake about it. Charleston is right there with them. They're very, very good. Oh, yeah. But Boonville moved down from 3A. It's been a few years now. They were winning the 4A when they were up there. So Boonville has been at the top of that conference. Charleston did beat them a couple years ago in the state championship game, and I know that was a real feather in their cap because really, if you know the all-time record between those two, do you realize it's very, very lopsided? Yes. At one point, I believe it was maybe last year I saw it maybe 49-15 and somewhere around there.
Boonville's favor.
Boonville is
Charleston's come on more in the last 20 years.
The whole point is that Boonville is traditionally the power. But Charleston's right there. Charleston had a young team last year, and they're moving up. look for them to be right back to where they've been over the last few years.
Yeah, and talking about Coach May over at Charleston, we interviewed him. Great guy to listen to. Gave great depth on his interview. I had a lot of sophomores that started on that team, and they had a really good defensive team overall, and they got stronger as the year went. They got healthier. Can you remember the running back's name that moved on now this senior? He tore his abdominal muscle early in the season, and that kind of slowed them a little bit, but they still got their record right. Had a great game against Mansfield late in the year. It's hard to pick against them, but Boonville coming back with 8 guys on defense off a dominant state championship team, 6 guys back on offense. Yes, they're going to lose Dax, but they still got a lot of good guys. Their quarterback's back. I got to take them as my number 1 in the conference. Mansfield, though, 10 back on offense, 10 back on defense, which I know a lot of those dudes are two-way, but that team really came on strong, had not a real typical season for them. They've really turned that program around down there. The Tigers are for real, and I'm talking about the Mansfield Tigers. Charleston is as well, but they could overcome and stay up there at the top. And really, I'm taking Boonville, but Mansfield and Charleston, it's too hard to pick who's going to come out in second. But it wouldn't shock me if Mansfield got it done and actually won the whole thing. And Charleston's going to be good as well. A lot of those guys, like we talked about, are going to be better. Lavaca, West Fork, Hackett, Greenland, Cedarville at the rest of that conference. Who's going to get in that 4 spot? I think that's a hard one. I think the Lavaca Golden Arrows would probably be my pick right now if I had to say.
I agree with you whenever you talk about Mansfield. Obviously, they have so many returning players from both sides of the ball. So I think they're only going to get better, especially from last season. Charleston's also returning most of their starters, I believe, from last season. Boonville, obviously defending state champions, they're definitely going to be one of the favorites in all of Class 3A. I believe they have 6 out of 8 returning players from last season. I believe Boonville also has their returning quarterback, Jason Washburn, I believe is his name.
Yes.
He will be returning as well, junior, or I believe he was a sophomore last year. So they still have 2 years of this guy left. So I've got to pick Boonville to win the conference. I think Charleston will be right behind them in Mansfield. I think right now it's kind of a toss-up between Charleston and Mansfield, but honestly, that 4th spot, I really can't even tell you to begin with who I would put there. Honestly.
So we're talking about this conference, and one of the things that we need to mention, or one of the people that we need to mention, Daniel Burton, running back there at Mansfield, very, very good player there. Impact player for Mansfield at running back. Definitely one of the kids that when we talk a lot about Dax Goff, he really kind of steps in, maybe not quite on that level. Dax, just unbelievable player all around, but Daniel Burton is a guy that's going to make his impact there in the 3A1. Moving on into the 3A2, 3A2 is an interesting conference there because we've got Salem. Salem is the team right now that seems to be the top. Mm-hmm. They had an incredible matchup with Mansfield. Mansfield beat them at Salem last year in the playoffs. That was a big feather in the Tigers' cap. I know that offseason has been something for that for the Salem team, Salem Greyhound team. I know that they've been thinking a lot about that game. You've got newcomer into the conference, Mayflower. Mayflower was very competitive in the 4A4 last year in a very evenly matched conference there last year. Melbourne is a traditional team that is always up there. Quitman is a team, especially as of recent, that has been very good. Atkins has a lot of tradition themselves. They're on the up-and-coming team. Mountain View is a team that played in 8-man for the last few years. They've decided to come back to 11-man. Episcopal and Yellville Summit are teams probably going to have a little bit of trouble this year trying to keep up with the rest.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, Salem is the favorite by most accounts to be the winner of that conference this season. A couple of interesting things. You mentioned Mountain View moves up from 8-man. Episcopal moves up from Class 2A. They have some guys on that team that can play, but they haven't been able to put it all together the last couple of years. Episcopal, they could be one of those sleeper teams that could come in and make the playoffs, I think, in talking with their coach and seeing what kind of facilities they have and things like that. They have pretty great pretty great support there at Episcopal. And then Atkins, they're going to be a team that returns a lot of players. They have a really strong senior class. Jaden Martin, a running back or fullback, however they describe him, I'm not sure.
Started as a quarterback as a sophomore.
Yeah. He's a really talented guy, and I'm sure Jaran could throw in a couple more names from Atkins that he's more familiar with. But.
I don't think he's a senior, but Colt Crawford, the quarterback last year.
I thought you were going to say something about my Atkins love.
No,
for a second.
Listen, now you touched a sore subject over there.
No.
When it comes to the 3A football, Dover Atkins is a big rival there.
Yeah.
And he's a big Dover guy. Don't even get it twisted.
Literally.
But Atkins is on their way up. They have struggled for the last several years. I think they lost, I can't remember how many, it was a ton. They lost several in a row there. Broke that streak last year versus Quitman with a 1-point win, just short of the playoffs after that. So they started building after that. And again, Atkins is a team that has a ton of tradition.
New head coach.
A lot of life there. Austin Dobbs. I think that they've got a chance to push for maybe that 4 spot, maybe as high as the 3 spot. But, your 5 playoff teams, you've got 6 for 5 in that conference. When you got Salem, Mayflower, Melbourne, Quitman, Atkins, and Mountain View, you got to find somebody is going to be left at home out of that 6.
Yep. And Quitman's a team that was in 2A for a very long time, moved up to 3A a couple years ago, and as a Conway Christian guy, that is our rivalry game every year, pretty much. We play that one early in the season a lot. And we played them in conference for a long time, and that was a pretty lopsided rivalry until recently. Conway Christian had their number for some time, and then Quitman went on a little bit of winning streak in that rivalry, and now Conway Christian won last year. I'm excited to watch that game this year. I'll be there at that game, should be at least. And, they have Jordan Morpayne as their quarterback. He's really athletic. And they have some offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and some skilled guys there. That are going to be pretty good. And then talking about the top of the conference, Mayflower, I believe they moved down from 4A to 3A this year. Coach Emerson, talking with him, he's really optimistic about what they can do in 3A this season, and he thinks they're going to have a really, really good shot at playing in Little Rock at the end of the season. So really, really excited about what they can do. And but Salem's going to be the team with the target on their back at the end of the day. So really, really exciting stuff in that conference. Just really excited. A lot of teams that could really come out and shock some people, I think.
Yeah, we talked about Atkins a little bit. That team returns 8 guys on both sides of the ball. I mean, they got a lot of sophomores last year. And we talked about, we were talking 2A in our last show we did with Bigelow and how they kind of were under our radar a little bit. Well, one of the reasons they were under our radar is because second game of the season, or it might have been their first game. I think it was the first game of the season. They struggled against Bigelow or against Atkins. And, and then I've covered Atkins several times over the years. And I was like, well, if they struggle this badly, and you can't, and I know that you can't go by like each week, you can't compare scores, but that kind of gave me like, hey, I think Bigelow may not be quite as good. But then once I got in front of them and saw them in person, I was like, wow, this team is really good. And I predicted them to win state the next week, which they did. But that Atkins team they were flashing at times, and they were very young. Jaden Martin is a senior. He's going to lead that team. But that they're definitely, I think it's going to be hard to keep them out of that 4 spot. Quitman is a team that's gotten some guys moved in, I've heard lately. Some guy from Bigelow.
Yep.
Some big-time talent there. That's going to help them.
Ryan Hood, correct?
Ryan Hobbs.
Yes.
And you hear there's been some conflicting reports on whether or not he's going to play football this season. So
okay.
I don't know that we're going to know for sure. At least I don't know anything for sure. We might not know for sure until we see if he steps out on the field in the first game.
And that's the difference in what we're dealing with now versus what we've done in so long is you just don't know with these kids anymore. You don't know if they're going to be at one school to the next every year. You don't know if they might decide to not play. Of course, that's not anything different than what it has been in the past. So, Hobbs was a very good player for him. Yes. You would think that Quitman would be trying to get him out on the field for sure.
Yes. To finish up strongly there, we got Mayflower moving back down from the 4A. They really, like you were talking about earlier, you saw them a few times. I saw them some. Definitely had a solid team last year. They lose some of their dudes, some of their quarterback. I think their quarterback was Oh, his dad
is Frankie Farrell, I believe was his name.
Fennell.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the quarterback they lost though. From Russellville, Gailey's son.
I think that was the year before.
Was that 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know I did a game for them 2 years ago, but they're losing a few guys, but they're still getting quite a bit back, definitely on the defensive side, and they're going to be right there and right after Salem. Salem's the team I'm going with, though. If you look at their numbers last year, their defense was a little bit undersung. They had a very good defense, and they returned 8 guys on that side of the ball. I think it's Salem's to lose here.
Obviously, everyone talks about Salem and Mayflower. Obviously, moving down from Class 4A, they actually it says that they have 5 returning starters from last season. They're losing their quarterback, so they're having to have a senior this year who's having to replace him from last season. I feel like there's a lot of potential within this conference. No one's talked about Melbourne so far as well, the Bearcats. Right. They've got some solid talent. I know they have some returning players as well. I think I don't know if Carson said it or someone said it. It's Salem's to lose. They're number 1 ranked in the coaches polls. They have them ranked. They have Mayflower ranked just under them. I think it's going to be between Salem and Mayflower probably.
And that would be after, you got it. Salem and Mayflower, Melbourne.
Yeah,
yes.
And then
Quitman and Atkins. Right.
Yeah, I would probably put Quitman in that 4th spot.
Moving down to the 3A3, this is probably the most intriguing conference in Class 3A. And you've got some teams that are moving in. Rivercrest and Newport, Walnut Ridge, Hoxie, Osceola, Manila, Harrisburg, and Piggott. New to the conference is Newport. New to the conference is Rivercrest. Those 2 teams are traditionally really, really good. Rivercrest just coming off the 4A, where they played for the 4A state championship last year.
Yeah, played Harding Academy about as good as anybody.
That's right. And so here they are again. They're now down to the 3A. They are back in 3A. They play 3A everything else. So they're back in 3A in football. Newport is a team that's very intriguing. I know that Keandre Baker is a kid that has left BB and is now back to Newport, but Newport also lost to Monty Wren. Monty Wren went to Greenwood. Now, that was before this thing was shot. Who knows by the time we get there if that's the way it's going to be. But Baker is a kid that's committed to Penn State. So that's a huge deal when you talk about to get a kid that is committed on that high of a level.
Yep. That he's one of those guys that whenever he commits to come transfer to your school, it can throw a wrench in all the other rankings, that everybody had beforehand. And when Amani Wren leaves, the same thing. Throws a wrench into all the rankings that people had beforehand. Mm-hmm. Looking at that conference, you have Rivercrest played in the 4A state championship game last season, I believe. Really tough team moving in. A lot of the 3A coaches are, really they had a tough move with Rivercrest coming down to the 3A. And then moving on to Newport, we've already talked a little bit about them. They're kind of a perennial power. They've pretty consistently have a solid team at least. And now with Keandre Baker moving in, they're going to be a special team to me. And then you move on to Walnut Ridge. They have a running back, Enrique Perez. He is one of those guys that would probably be on the D3 Auto Sales MVP watch list.
Yes.
He is a very physical, strong, electric running back. Although all the adjectives you want to use, you can use on him. And then Hoxie, they're a team that has been in the mix the last few years with a pretty solid program. Osceola, they're a team that's a little bit of a strong contender every year as well. So, you move on down the line, a couple of teams that have been struggling recently, but, it's similar to 2A where you never know when a team is just going to pop out of nowhere and be a really strong contender for the conference. So, really going to be a competitive conference this season and a lot to look forward to if you're a fan of any of these teams.
Boy, I'll tell you what, that conference right there, when you talk about a 5 seed coming out of that conference, that's not going to be a cakewalk at all for any team that plays them. You don't even want to see the 3A3 on your side of the bracket in the playoffs. What do you got, Alex? Anything?
Honestly, I come from Class 3A3. These are schools from my area. In my opinion, I think Class 3A3 is going to be one of the toughest conferences possibly in the whole state. Just you see the star power and the star level. Coaches polls, they have Walnut Ridge ranked number 1, Rivercrest right under them. I think it's going to be a toss-up between Walnut Ridge and Rivercrest. I know Rivercrest comes in. They have the number 1 points scored from last season when they come into Class 3A3. I think over 40 they averaged. I believe. Let
me say something before I get. I don't want to. I'll miss the thought if I don't say this. Last year, Rivercrest went to number 1 in 4A for us, and everybody laughed at us about putting them there. There's no way. And then they got beat by Mills, and of course Mills was a 5A team last year, and very, very good 5A team. A lot of people laughed. They ended up in the state finals in 4A, so here they are now dropping to 3A. Absolutely a state title contender.
There's just so many schools to really talk about. Osceola, they got a brand new coach. Coach Cook, I believe is his name. He's coming back to Osceola, bringing so much hype, trying to rebuild that program. Hoxie, Newport. I mean, these are tough teams. These are tough teams.
Yeah.
If I got to put a top four, I probably
top 5 to get the playoffs in 3A.
So top 5. Let's do Rivercrest number 1, Walnut Ridge number 2. I got Hoxie at number 3, Newport at number 4, and I've got Osceola at number 5.
Let me throw you a little tidbit here. Hoxie has beaten Walnut Ridge. Now, you want to talk about a unique rivalry. Hoxie and Walnut Ridge, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Hoxie baseball field was in the Walnut Ridge School District. It's seriously one side of the road is Walnut Ridge, the other side of the road is Hoxie. Hoxie has beaten Walnut Ridge 24 out of the last 27 times they've played. Right. So while Walnut Ridge is getting a lot of pub this year, and rightfully so, Enrique Perez is one of those guys. They run a very unique offense. They run a single wing offense.
Yes.
It's very, very unique. If it's run correctly, it's very hard to defend. It's hard to prepare for it. But Hoxie has that it's just that thing that they have. Well, you're right. But they have, sometimes
it's the Warrior logo, I think, that helps them as well.
Sometimes it's just you have this thing over a team.
They're physical.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I will tell you, Hoxie, when we got the chance to see Hoxie last year, they were just so well coached, so schooled. Coach Sears does a great job over there at Hoxie. So while I know that Walnut Ridge is getting a lot of that pub, I'm going to tell you right now, Hoxie has got that on the bulletin board now. Sure. I guarantee you in their locker room, they've got that on their bulletin board. People saying Walnut Ridge is going to beat them. Let's move on to the 4.
I didn't get to talk about it yet.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We went to Alex first. We've been doing another way around. So, I mean, Rivercrest dropping down to 3A now. We're hearing a lot of stuff, a lot of chatter. Some guys have gone over to Osceola. So it's kind of hard to pick exactly what's going to happen there exactly. But Rivercrest, even with a couple guys leaving, coming down, I think I've got them. It's so hard. This is the hardest one to pick, I think. Rivercrest, I've got pretty close there. Them and Walnut Ridge. Newport, though, I mean, Newport returns 10 guys on defense. And, I mean, they were loaded last year. I think they had they returned 10 on both sides of the ball, actually. So, I mean, coming off a 6-6 season, I mean, they're going to be hard not to say that. I mean, you can't argue with putting them in the number 1 spot. And then Hoxie, like you said, they've kind of got that thing over Walnut Ridge, or at least they have. That's something that is hard for the other team to deal with, to bust through sometimes. I can remember for years in my rivalry where we probably had the more talented team, but we lost some games that we shouldn't have lost. And there's reasons for that. But, coaching's one of them. And Hoxie's a really well-coached team. So with Walnut Ridge getting the guy they got, we were talking about earlier, what's his name?
Enrique Perez.
Yeah.
That's
going to help them a lot. So, I mean, you definitely got Rivercrest, Newport, Walnut Ridge, and Hoxie, I think, are definitely in the playoffs. Who's going to get that 5 spot? I think Osceola is probably going to get the edge there over Piggott, Harrisburg, and Manila. Some games to point out: Rivercrest at Newport on October the 4th. Hoxie versus Rivercrest on the 11th. Just listen to this. This is their last 4 of their last 5 games at Rivercrest. At Newport on the 4th versus Hoxie on the 11th. versus Walnut Ridge on the 18th at Osceola. That's 4 of their last 5 there at Rivercrest. It's unbelievable. Let's move on to the 3A4. Perryville is a team that I think that you're putting a lot of stock in this year. Glen Rose is the team that has the tradition there. Very, very good team there. And, again, we talk about tradition a lot. Because why do we talk about tradition? Well, the reason we talk about tradition is because they're good every year. Yeah. That's what makes the tradition. So, with that said, can Perryville overcome the tradition of Glen Rose? I'm going to throw a team at you right now that I really believe will surprise. That's the Danville Littlejohns. Coach DJ Crane coming back to Danville. I really think that let me tell you, I'm being honest with you, tell you, DJ Crane is one of the very best in the business. He knows how to coach kids. He knows how to get a team and a community behind a team. I'm telling you right now, I will not be shocked, even as tough as it's been for Danville over the last few years, if they find themselves in the top 5 and in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Danville's a team that Coach Crane really took to another level when he was there.
Yes.
And Coach Crane coming back, in his interview with you, he mentioned that he had picked up a few things coaching at Bentonville, I believe, under Coach Grant. And Coach Grant, I talked to him, fantastic guy, fantastic coach there, make deep playoff runs every year at Bentonville. But the reason I put Perryville at number 1 personally, and I believe that they're going to win the conference, talking to Coach Fairbanks, he's very confident in this senior class. They have a defensive back and a quarterback. I believe his name is Connor Frith or Connor Firth. I can't remember which one it is. He had, I think, upwards of 10 picks last season at defensive back. Really, really good ball hawking safety. He's just all over the field. And as a quarterback, he knows the game very well, according to Coach. According to what Coach Fairbanks has told me about him working with him. He said that from that perspective, he's one of the easiest quarterbacks to work with because he just knows the game so well. And so Perryville, to me, the reason I put them above Glen Rose, now if Glen Rose wins the conference, it wouldn't shock me. They're a talented team. But they're so young, and they graduate a lot of players from last season. Heath Balance did a lot for them. And, one player doesn't make a team, but if one player did make a team, it might be Heath Balance. So, and Coach Keener there knows what he's doing. He's really preaching physicality with that Glen Rose team, which is what they're known for, being a very physical and aggressive team. So, if he can instill that tradition they have at Glen Rose into these this young team, they have a good shot to win the conference. But to me, Perryville, with the experience they have and the talent they have, to me they're the number 1 team in their conference. And it wasn't an easy pick, but it's in knowing what I know about them, that was the team to me that if I had to put money on it, that's who I put money on. Throwing
it to the other side of the table.
You want to go first?
Sure. Perryville, I agree. They got 9 back on offense, 7 back on defense, something like that. Got a lot of guys back, coming off a really good year, 8-4. Perryville's one of those teams that they kind of have little streaks where they'll have a 3 or 4 year span where they rip off, and they're a lot better than a lot of people give them credit for, because you don't really hear about them late in the playoffs when you get to state. I mean, when you get to like the state championship, you might hear them in the first couple of rounds, but they've had a pretty good tradition since around 2008, and they kind of turned that thing around. I had a good buddy that's from there. But Perryville, it's hard to pick them above Glen Rose because Glen Rose is so tradition-rich, so well-coached. But I think that's where I'm going to go as well. I think I'm going to give Perryville the nod. Glen Rose losing Heath Balance, like we talked about, was a big loss. Paris, I think they've had a really good program. Coach Weaver over there, I think he's going into his 4th season. They've got a lot of talent coming back. They've got some really good receivers coming back. I think they have a chance to make some noise as well to kind of sneak up in the top 2 there. So I'm going to go with Perryville, Glen Rose, Paris right there on the outside. And then after that, it gets kind of interesting. But I think Jessieville is probably solid in those top 5. I'd give them the 4-0. And then Magnet Cove is right there. I'm going to go ahead and go with them as well in 5. So that's where I'm at.
Yep. This Glen Rose team, it's coming off a really, really successful season. This is a team that would score 50 points in the playoffs. In 2 separate games, they scored over 50. Obviously, they took a pretty tough loss against Boonville in the state championship, and they're losing some talent. Perryville, obviously, they're probably going to come in and they're looking to be the number one ranked. If I had to pick, I would probably pick them number one. And this Perryville team, they're coming off of an 8-win year, so a really successful season. They just lost to Glen Rose. They lost to Glen Rose 37-0. So, but like we said, Glen Rose, so much talent is being lost there. If I had to pick, I think I would go Perryville number one, Glen Rose number two. It's tough after that, honestly. Yeah. I think I might throw Jessieville number three, possibly Paris number four, and then if I had to pick a number five, man, that's so tough to pick. Honestly, let's go Magnet Cove.
Magnet Cove is a team that has played a lot of good football over the last few years, so you can't really, shake a stick, as they would say, at those guys.
Yeah, one thing worth mentioning with this conference, Cutter Morning Star moves in. They've been playing 8-man football the last few years. They were in 2A for a while, and now they're moving up to 3A from 8-man. So, 8-man teams can get a little dicey when it comes to predictions because you just don't know what you're going to get moving from 8-man to 11-man sometimes. But they could be one of those teams for the 5 spot. It's just hard to predict something like that from 8-man to 11-man.
I know, and I did the interview, and it's hard when you do interviews with guys and you sit down and talk to them, you feel good about them. Right. One of the things that Danville told me and Coach Crane told me is the size that they have there. They're guys. They've got guys running the football that are 200 pounds, and so in high school especially, that's a battering ram when it comes to that. So that's something to think about there. It's going to be a good battle there in 4-3-8.
And I just wanted to touch on. I'm glad you brought Danville back up because I didn't mention them any. But listening to that interview with Coach Crane, him and his wife, Danville was home to them.
Yes.
Okay, they made it a home there And I just got the feel from the interview and the way he talked, and when we know how good of a coach he is and what he did there the first time, I feel like that's a homecoming, and I just feel like there's a really good feeling about where they're at, and I think that's all going to kind of, how do you say it, kind of progress into something really special there. So, like you said, it wouldn't shock me that they end up sneaking in that playoff spot way down the list.
Well, go ahead.
I don't even remember what I was going to say, but go ahead.
I'm saying Wilkins is also coming off of a 600-plus yard rushing season, so obviously he's only going to improve this next season.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the 7-3-8. We're running out of time here. We're trying to keep this as short as we possibly can. It's hard to get it all in a period of 45 minutes that we are trying to get them in here. 7-3-A. Prescott is the team that seems to be the favorite, maybe the favorite in 3A this year. Bismarck is a team that Coach Keithley has done a fantastic job resurrecting that program there. Ouachita County, Harmony Grove there at Ouachita County. We just want to take a little credit for that, by the way, because they messaged us and said, we don't want to be called Camden Harmony Grove anymore. We put it out on our site that we will no longer call them Camden Harmony Grove. We will call them Ouachita County. And you know what? Everybody else started following suit. So I just want to take a little bit of dap on that, pat ourselves on the back there. Center Point Smackover, Falk, Parker's Chapel, and Horatio. Smackover got a new coach out there, Don Harrison. I interviewed him. He feels pretty good about his Buckaroos. Down in the 7-3A and really in South Arkansas in the 8-3A as well. Lots of athletes down there. I think that this conference, outside of maybe the top two, is going to be an interesting matchup and see how these guys kind of fall in.
Yeah. Smackover to me is the most interesting team in this because they picked up a really good transfer, and I forget his name, but he was the starting quarterback at El Dorado last season. And now he's at Smackover. That's a team, whatever their quarterback's name was, and Brad's looking it up right now, but whatever their quarterback's name was, he is a stud. He was considered one of the rising stars in Class 6A last season before he transferred over to Smackover. And Brad's going to
I'm working on it.
Pull it up real quick.
That definitely ain't it.
So, and then I want to talk a little bit about Prescott and Bismarck. Those are the top two teams, probably two of the top 5 teams in the state by a lot of accounts.
Yeah.
Bismarck brings back a lot of talent, and they were an 11-win team last season. Ben Keithley, to me, has a really good case to be the best quarterback in Class 3A. And then Prescott has to go to Bismarck late in the season, that could be one of the most hyped up games of the entire year. So looking at those two teams, those are going to be the two that a lot of people have as 1 and 2 in that conference, and some people could put those interchangeable. To me, Prescott is the top player in that the top team in that conference, and they have the talent to beat Bismarck. But if Bismarck plays a better game at home, anything can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm right along with y'all. I really like Bismarck a lot. We did them versus Glen Rose last year. Glen Rose took care of business, but Bismarck really was impressive. What the coach there, Coach Keith Lee, has done in just a very short time. And his son, the quarterback, is extremely talented. And I think that they've got a lot of guys back. I think they're going to really make some noise this year. It's going to be hard for me to not pick them. Number one, Prescott, though. Prescott was so good last year, and they've still got so much coming back. You could really it's hard for me not to pick Bismarck here, but I think Prescott probably gets the nod, just barely, but it's really close. Harmony Grove, I got to interview Coach Horskamp. Ernie, he is a great coach, gave a great interview. We're going to play that later as we get closer to 0 week. He really talked to me a lot about Harmony Grove. They I think they're a little bit of a sleeper. I mean, they are really good. I've got them in my overall top 10, actually, for 3A. That's how highly I believe in that team. They're another team that could upset. If you go back and look at their schedule last year, they started out with like Harding Academy, Haynesville, Louisiana, who's a powerhouse, and they had another one in there that was really tough. Who was it? It was Junction City, which they beat Junction City, and then they lost those two, and then they reeled off. They went undefeated in conference. They finished out the season undefeated. So other than those two non-conference games, so they really had a great year. Of course, they ran into Boonville in the second round, and wasn't a good night, but it wasn't a good night for anybody against Boonville last year as they won the state championship. So Harmony Grove, I really like right there behind Bismarck and Prescott. And then after that, it's really a toss-up for the 4, 5, and 6 spots to me. I'm going to have to say I think Smackover with some additions there from El Dorado. I think they're going to I'll give them the 4 spot. Center Point coming in right after that.
Obviously, Prescott's going to be a top-class favorite in Class 3A. For me, they're going to be number 1 simply for the fact that the Coach Brian Glass and what he's done for this squad and what he's done. He has an overall record it's 48-5. He has lost 5 games in his career at Prescott, and they're returning 4 players from last season. I feel like Prescott is only going to get tougher this year. To me, they're going to be one of the favorites to win in Class 3A in general. I feel like they're going to dominate this conference. They have the ability to dominate this conference. But there are some teams in here I don't think you want to count out. I think I got Bismack at number 2, Smackover at number 3. I think Smackover could do some really good stuff this year. At that point, you probably put Harmony Grove at that number 4 spot. At that point, you probably put Center Point at number 5.
Prescott is a team that you really look in year in, year out. Outside of Boonville, probably the top team in 3A. I mean, there's a big battle in between those two, and I'm talking about over several years. You throw Charleston in there as well; they've been right up there. But
quarterback that transferred from El Dorado, Mitchell Polk.
Okay, I was making sure on that, but yeah, I saw that name. You're right. But anyway, Prescott is a team that is they have every time they get out on the field, they're going to have some of the best athletes.
Right.
And then not only that, but they also athletic or just traditionally, I should say, they're right there. It's just they have all of the mix, I should say, to make this thing really, really special for them this year in 24 and 25. Well, really 24. The 24-25 school year. Obviously, you got to watch out for Glen Rose, Boonville, those type of programs.
Dwayne White, receiver for Prescott. I don't know if y'all mentioned him. He's a stud, and he's about 6'4", about 190. Can get out and go. He's their returning guy. He's a big-time weapon for them as well. So they're going to be really tough to stop.
Yep. Let's move on to 8-3A. We're running a little bit behind on time here. McGee, Fordyce, Barton, Rison, Dumas, Drew Central, Palestine, Wheatley, and Lake Village. You want to talk about athletes. I mean, even Lake Village, you go all the way down to them. Aquavius Dunbar just moved on to Tulsa, I believe. Unbelievable player there. He was a great basketball player along with a football player. You just see different types of athletes down there. And they're in our poll, they're picked 8th here. McGee at the top, Fordyce, Barton, Rison. This is according to you, by the way.
Yeah.
Dumas, Drew Central, and Palestine Wheatley are your order there. Give us a little bit of insight on the 8-3A.
Yeah, the McGee Owls are a blue blood. They are one of the bluest of blue bloods in class.
I know they're red.
Yeah, in Class 3A. The McGee Owls are consistently every year probably going to be in the playoffs. And if you don't make it in McGee, that's a massive disappointment. Now, I have them ranked at number 1. Fordyce is another one of those teams that in the state of Arkansas, with Bear Bryant Stadium and winning a lot of state titles in Class 2A, they are another one of the bluest of blue bloods. So two blue bloods in this conference. Barton's another one. They are a massive blue blood. So, those three teams, Barton's kind of been down a little bit, but they're getting back up to where they want to be. And then McGee and Fordyce. Fordyce is a team. They run the option. They're a physical, run-heavy team. They have had some solid college prospects. Like Carmelo Allen, I believe, was their defensive end, or Carmelo Allen, one of the two. Was a defensive end for them, the three-star prospect, and
Carmelo and Akeem.
Yeah. So, and then Rison's a team with a lot of history as well. When they play Fordyce every year, that is probably for those two, it's as big as the Super Bowl. It's huge. It's a historic rivalry. That game, anybody can win at any time. Now that they're in the same conference for a long time, they were split between the 2 and 3A, and now they're in the same conference. So that's a game that can go either way every year. Dumas is a team that I probably could have ranked a little higher, but they're a team that a lot of people think is going to have a really good season. And then you move on to Drew Central, Palestine Wheatley, and Lake Village. Palestine Wheatley has a new head coach over there. So, they
Pascal, by the way.
Yeah. So they could be a team that could come out and shock some people.
Absolutely. Moving over to you guys. What do you think?
I've got where I disagree there is I have Fordyce ahead of McGee, even though, that's a flip of a coin somewhat. I do think Fordyce coming back with, I think they've got about 15 returning starters on both sides altogether. You interviewed them this year, Brad, and they know what they're doing when they get to high school. They run that program all the way through 4th grade, 3rd grade probably. And they just plug and they just reload every year. And this year they don't have to reload as much because they're all coming back for the most part. So I've got Fordyce winning the 8-3A. McGee coming in right on them after that. Rison, a team that's been down a little bit as of recent years. They're another team that you could say blue blood about. I do think they are going to get back into the swing of things this year. Probably put them in my number 3 spot. Barton coming along a little bit. Barton's had some tough years over the last few years. Frank McClellan, of course, one of the greatest coaches in Arkansas football history. I want to say Barton went 50-0 in regular season at one point in the 80s. It was like a national streak. One of the best. At the same time, there was another team in Arkansas. I won't even mention their name, but they were on the other end of that spectrum. And that team's a really good program now. We'll get to them later in the 4A. But so that's where I'm going. Fordyce, McGee, Rison, Barton, and then I'm going to have to go with Dumas next. And that's hard to say because Drew Central's got some things going for them. Palestine Wheatley, with a new coach, they've always got athletes in Palestine Wheatley. My grandma lived in Wheatley for several years, so I definitely know that community a little bit. Always talent there. So that's where I'm at. What do you got, Alex?
I've definitely got McGee number 1. They've got 5 out of 6 returning players from last season. I think they're going to be a big pick, probably a big pick to win in all of Class 3A. Other than that, honestly, I've got Dumas at number 2. They only had 4 or 5 wins last season. I'm not even too sure if they made the playoffs or not, but I think they have potential. I know they got some returning players from last season, some guys that did some things for them. Other than that, probably Fordyce at number 3. Let's do Barton at number 4 and Rison at number 5.
So that's the 3A there, and we're going to move on real quick. Let's talk about some players to watch in 3A for the D3 Auto Sales MVP Award.
Yep. So with each of these classes, I did Offensive and Defensive Player of the Year. For me, Offensive Player of the Year is Enrique Perez, running back at Walnut Ridge, especially with that single wing, run-heavy offense. And then I got to go on defense with Connor Frith of Perryville. Really, really good safety. He's going to do a lot of stuff for them this year on offense and defense. Mitchell Polk, the transfer from El Dorado to Smackover, he's a guy you might throw in there. And,
yes.
Carmelo Allen,
Keithley at Bismarck.
Ben Keithley at Bismarck. He's going to be a guy that you can throw in there. And then the receiver at Prescott.
What was his name again?
White. Yeah,
right.
He's going to be
Definitely
in the mix for Player of the Year. And then. Jordan Moore-Payne Equipment is a really solid quarterback. So those are a couple names that you could throw in there. I'm sure there's more that I didn't get to. Of course, Washburn, the quarterback at Boonville, should have a pretty good season. So a lot of talent in Class 3A that a lot of people should watch out for this year.
Yeah, we'll see if Hobbs gets back to the flow.
Yeah, he could be in there. He could be in the mix.
He's a stud.
If he's playing football, he could be one of those guys. I believe he was All-State as a junior at Bigelow last season, so he could be an impact player for sure.
So let's go around the table real quick and talk about our state championship prediction for Class 3A. I think, I'll tell you what, it would be an interesting matchup between Prescott and Rivercrest.
Yes.
That would be a fun matchup in the 3A there. I think one that would draw a lot of eyeballs. I will go with I will go with Prescott, but I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of good contenders. 3A and 4A to me were the hardest two to pick, very, very deep. As far as just trying to pick top 10, that was the hardest one for me. I'm going to go with Prescott, but boy, I'm going to tell you right now, Rivercrest is going to be right there. Boonville, you're always tough. They're always right there. Let's see here. Glen Rose, last year Glen Rose gave Boonville all they wanted. Newport got a chance. Walnut Ridge, you can go down this 3A.
You have any sleeper teams you think maybe could make a run?
Oh, well, I mean, if you talk about sleeper teams, I think Charleston is a sleeper that could do it. Mayflower's another one that could.
Mansfield.
Can you call Salem a sleeper? If you're talking about a top team in the conference, a team that went 12-0 last year before their first loss, there's a lot of good teams in 3A.
Yeah, I would have to pick Prescott as well to be a state champion, but my sleeper team is Mansfield. Mansfield had a really good season last year. Coach Overton really turned that program around. So Mansfield would be my sleeper team to make it to Little Rock this season.
I've got Prescott for 100%. I'm not even, but in my sleeper team, I don't even know if you can call them a sleeper team. I've got Rivercrest.
Yeah.
The program that they built last year, obviously coming off of 4A, I feel like they've losing some players, but I think their momentum, they're only going to keep it. They're only going to keep their momentum. So not really a sleeper team, but probably top two. That's who I'd have to pick.
Well, y'all haven't really said their name when we've talked about winning it all, but so I don't consider them a sleeper at all. But Fordyce last year, what a lot of y'all are forgetting is they lost to Prescott 7-6 in the playoffs.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
They lost to them, I think, 16-6 in the regular season or something like that, 10 points. Fordyce, it's so loaded at the top here with Boonville, Prescott, Fordyce. Bismarck is also right there. I mean, if Bismarck doesn't win their conference, because they're in there with Prescott, they're a sleeper for me. Mansfield, I mentioned them right when you're about to talk about it, Carson. So, I mean, all those teams, that's kind of my top five in 3A this year. After that, Walnut Ridge, Rivercrest, McGee, Newport, Camden, Harmony Grove, Ouachita County is another one that I've got in the top 10. I really think they could be a top 17 for itself, and I'm really high on them.
3A is a tough one to pick, no doubt about it.
Very deep.
Very, very deep. And so, anyway, we're going to wrap it up here in our 3A preview. Thank you for watching. And, again, you can catch this as a part of our Hometown Sports series of preview for the Arkansas or for the state of Arkansas. It has been a lot of fun to do. And we're going to move on. You'll be able to catch 4A, 5A, 6A, and 7A just by watching right here on Facebook and on YouTube.
Thanks again for joining us on the Arkansas Sports Network's Hometown Sports Football Preview. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Arkansas Sports Network on YouTube to catch more previews and all the latest updates on your favorite teams. It's the ASN Classic, Elkins versus Warren, September the 13th. Tickets are available at the link in the description.